If you're here, you already sense there's something out there, something magical and mysterious, just waiting for you to find. And you've probably already discovered it isn't as easy as just thinking happy thoughts. You're not alone. Generations of shamans, philosophers, seers, and scientists have pursued this eternal quest. Where their ideas come together, you'll find powerful tools to cultivate magic and self-mastery in your own life. Welcome to the Magic and Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Donna Woodwell. I'm a former journalist and author, a master astrologer, and a hermetic initiate, and it's my honor to be your guide. In each episode, I'll meet you at the crossroads of science and spirit, reason and intuition, to help you discover the wisdom that works for you. Are you ready? The adventure awaits. Hello, and welcome back to the Magic and Mastery Podcast. This is episode 014, The Body Electric. Now, in this episode, we get to talk about all things having to do with our human energy field, from my experiences falling down and then getting back up again, to our joint experiences with our shamanic training and how you can begin to tap into this essential part of our human nature.
But before we dive in, don't forget that we've added headings and timestamps to the show notes, as well as links to all the books we referenced during the episode, and probably the shows and a little other tidbits that we randomly threw in there. And you can find the show notes at www.magicandmastery.com/podcast. So, and as always, don't forget to stay until the end. Sometimes we give you a little homework assignment. Sometimes we have an exercise for you. So it's a lot of fun to just put into practice what we've covered during a particular week. So you can try it for yourself and make some magic in your own world. Let's get started.
Today, we are going to talk about the body electric. Doesn't that sound like a lovely title, Chris?
I love it.
I do too. It's been extremely important to me because, alas, early on Friday morning, I was out walking the dog in the middle of the night. I was sleepwalking the dog and tripped over the leash and the curb, and down I went and popped a few ribs out of place. The next couple days were decidedly unpleasant. But I feel much better now, and it's only been a week. But see, I have been raking myself every day. I've been putting hands on my ribs and feeling that healing energy run with them. It occurs to me that this experience may not be usual for everyone, which is kind of sad because in my world, healing energy should be available to everyone. Free of charge. All you have to do is tap into it and ask. So I thought it'd be a great idea to talk about on our radio show, my experiences and Chris' experiences, because I know we've had different kinds of experiences, but I'm sure they will synthesize together into something incredibly powerful and healing, which, quite frankly, we could all use right now, especially me and my rib cage. So, Chris, what do you think about the term body electric?
Well, first of all, I'm so happy you're recovering, because that's a horrible fall and a horrible sensation. Jeez. God, I feel for you there. But yeah, the bioelectrical system, I mean, that just speaks of everything in itself. I mean, we are a bioelectrical system through synapses and dendrites that are just firing everywhere. And then life is this vibration, and that kind of electricity is like that moving force that's kind of propelling everything, and everything is electric, you know? That's what I think about. And it's that electric light, the electric dreams, and then I spiral right into Philip K. Dick and do androids dream of electric dreams. We're totally going to spiral into sci-fi nerdom.
Well, if you want to be sci-fi nerdy, you know, we can certainly talk about electric being the electromagnetic field. Mm-hmm. And I always thought this is one of the things that makes science even better than fiction. Yeah. Because when they discovered that light was actually a movement in a field of electricity and magnetic forces running perpendicular to each other, one begets the other at infinitum. It is literally polarity moving in space time
Yeah.
that creates light. And what a beautiful metaphor for the hermetic experience that all is vibration.
Hmm.
And then light itself, once we discovered what it was.
Yeah, no, it's actually that what you brought up is one of the things that just fascinates me and excites me one of the most because it is just the varying degree of spectrum of reality, whether we can hear it or see it, just a matter of the speed of the wavelengths itself. And actually, I don't know if you remember Mickey Hart from the Grateful Dead. This had to have been maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago. He worked with NASA to do something called the Rhythms of the Universe, and they captured, the light of supernovas, and that's what we can see. And then they slowed down the light waves so you can actually hear these cosmic kind of events happening, and made the whole music out of it. And like, it is fantastic. But it's a great point because it is that varying scale of reality, what we can see, what we can hear, and that tangibility. And it is, to me, that's actually pure magic in itself.
I know your shamanic training and my shamanic training have been different, but mine was based on a lot of hands-on healing. That's where I started because I was so sick in the beginning,
Yeah.
and I had to do a lot of self-healing. And so my teacher, Eileen West, spent a lot of time teaching us how to do hands-on healing. She saw clients for 40 some odd years, and going to her for an energetic healing was kind of like being plugged into a fire hydrant. It's a very intense experience. That's one of those things that comes from a lot of practice over a long
Mm.
period of time. I don't expect to ever be as potent a force of nature. I take for granted that I learned when I was, 22 to plug into the energy field of the earth, to get really,
Hmm.
really grounded to the point where, like, that feeling when you're just like, oh, wow, this is amazing. And I could just lay here because I feel like I'm part of the heartbeat of the planet. And you feel so heavy and so attached to something deeper than yourself and everything else. So when we would sit in ceremony, our ceremonies were like having a healing and channeling divine spirit in a collective at the same time. So it kind of amplified the experience again and again and again because we were plugged in always. So to be able to connect to that energy and get really, really hot, at least I experience it. I know everybody else doesn't experience it that way. I get really, really hot.
Same here, burning up.
Yeah, really burning hot, and but at the same time it's pleasant and relaxing at the same time. It's extremely hot. And it accelerates healing of all kinds. It doesn't make things go away instantaneously, but it makes them get better faster than it would under ordinary circumstances. And it's not an intellectual thing. You don't think about it.
No, I mean it's pretty visceral, and actually, we have similarities. I actually had to go through a process of healing myself from a lot of ailments, and I've been there with car accidents before too, but I was usually in my younger days because I had 9 lives. A little bit of like Rasputin going on. But no, it's a potent force, and the body itself has that. I mean, we talked about the last episode about the body's resiliency, but tuning into that cellular level, there is that whole connective system that is bioelectric that kind of fuels everything on whether it's the electron spin and the resonance that kind of happens, and that and like it's just reigniting the whole body landscape. But it was kind of funny. Like yesterday, I actually was out in the forest. We had this beautiful first taste of spring, and that earthing is so important to do. And also did like a nice little forest bathe. Had my shirt off, had my the sunlight kind of beating down, and just being very still and connecting with that with the bioelectric electromagnetic field of the earth in itself, and like because that's like all those kind of like I'm pointing and waving my hands like people can see me, but this orb of of the field itself that everything kind of have and emits, kind of interacts with each other, and that is like this kind of intimate dance that we're in with everything. Everything has a field of that length. It varies in spectrum, like we were talking about before, about the relative nature of those fields. But that's how like everything sort of interacts and kind of intermeshes, and so even on that cellular level, we can tune into those forces within our bodies with the good gut microbes and the parasites that we're a host of, and everyone's just kind of like and moving along, and once that frequency is kind of aligned, then we're in balance, and it's getting back to that restoration point, and the body's extremely resilient in that way. It's fascinating.
I think it's absolutely amazing. I remember going to a science museum in Los Alamos, New Mexico. And Los Alamos, the place of the birth of nuclear weapons. In one of the exhibits that they had there, I don't remember the name of it, some kind of a microelectron meter.
Mm.
And it's wired up to like a little kid model of like a handprint. With a metal plate under it, and you put your hand on it, and the little microelectrometer goes up and down depending on the electrical potential, whatever you would call it, of your hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember putting my hand on there going, nothing's happening. And then putting on that healing energy and watching it just spike all the way up to the end. Really hard. Like when I got home, I called the science museum and I asked them to send me the model number of whatever that widget was because I wanted to buy one on my own. Which of course I never did. I never actually followed through. But I figured if there was a widget
after this.
Everyone go call the Science Museum in Los Alamos and ask them what their micro electro potential meter thingy attached to the handprint is, because that was the coolest thing. But it made me realize that it wasn't just something from my shamanic experience that made sense as a model to work with. It actually had some measurable science-y potential, which means that it's also crossing into the consensus reality. Not all magic loves, that gray space between real and not real. And it changes what you think of. And that's the point. It's changing your reality. But I always find it fun when there are things that can be measured.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually a super important reminder because we get really accustomed, and I mean our whole body is adapted and evolved to actually see this one spectrum of reality, but there's countless wavelengths of light and sound going on right before our very eyes that we're just tuning out because it would be sensory overload if we see it all at once.
If you're a bee, you see something differently.
Exactly. It doesn't mean it's not there now.
If you're my dog, you hear things I can't hear.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that is so when we're practicing magic, we're bridging those gaps between these different spectrums, and we're kind of like widening or shrinking our field itself. And I think it's absolutely fascinating. That's why I think like so many people are in love with quantum physics. Like it's mind blowing, but it's also this bridge between all these ancient traditions and what we've been talking about. So many parallels, and because this is a very abstract, poetic concept.
This documentary on dark matter, and it was fascinating watching the cosmologists squirm because they had to get on camera and say, yes, we have come to the realization based on the cutting edge science that we thought we knew a lot, but now we realize that 95% of the cosmos is made of stuff we cannot see and do not understand. And that upsets us. You are honest about the experience of, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, welcome to my world. I don't know.
Exactly. That's the wisest thing anyone could say.
What wonders are there to behold in recognizing that 95% of measurable existence is unknown? that why not have that fit
Yeah.
into some of these experiences like healing energy that have been remarkably consistent across history and from culture to culture to culture. We keep coming back to these ideas again and again. And though you can posit a mother culture, which I do not discard completely as an idea, I still think when we keep reinventing things or rediscovering things, that it's innate to our human condition and not some learned behavior, some cultural artifact. It's who we are. And if that's who we are, then all it is a matter of unlearning what people might be telling you is true and tuning back into that original magic, that original healing, what's the word? Destiny.
Innate wisdom.
Yes. Because if we can do that, then we start being able to undo not just the damage of, klutzy me falling over in the middle of the night, but the deeper hurts, the toxicity of our physical environment, our emotional environment, our mental environment, which really all mirrors of one another. I always wondered, you're a better person to answer this than I am. Don't you think that all this toxic stuff we keep putting in the environment, all the plastics, all the poisons, are just the physical mirror manifestation of all of the emotional and mental stuff that we are putting out into the environment?
Yeah. I absolutely do. And actually, you brought up as a kind of a pet peeve of mine. I'm sure you're aware of like the next plot to do a little more geoengineering of trying to chalk the stratosphere to reflect back the sunlight and, help promote balance out climate change. And Bill Gates is a big fan of that. But my point on with that is there is that disconnect. We're seeing that so readily separating again from natural cycles and from like trying to latching on to too much materialism of over fixing things kind of thing.
Yeah. Didn't they read the Hippocratic Oath? I thought it said first do no harm.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't understand why you wouldn't go through the basis of trying to do the more appropriate steps first rather than trying to just take this giant leap gambling with the planet and 7 billion lives on this kind of theoretical cool experiment. Like I'm all for science and experimenting on things, but I don't like how there's
Maybe not the whole planet at once since it's the only one we have.
yeah, exactly. Or like that should be a decision that everyone's kind of contributing. You would think a little bit too.
I think I saw the movie for that once or twice or multiple times. Mad scientists decide to drill into the core of the earth to see what happens.
I know it's a total movie, but this is also a fun point too that our culture, our books, our media kind of they do reflect what's in the collective unconscious, and you can kind of get a barometer. This is why a lot of people do like sci-fi because it picks up on this precognition of what theoretically the trends could lead to toward the future as a warning, and it's really odd. Odd's not really the right word that a lot of these things sort of come true, and we like to ignore the signs quite often. We get very comfortable with that.
Well, I also recognize that not everyone is going to have the opportunity to meet a shaman teacher and sit in circles for 10 years and have amazing things happen to their perception of reality. So we have to find ways that people can experience such states for themselves, either spontaneously or make it a little bit easier. And so once I did, as I said, 10 years of the work in the shamanic tradition, I decided to go ahead and get my Reiki certifications because at least Reiki trademark was an energy that was more recognizable, like the Kleenex brand of facial tissues, and that no one was going to recognize what I was doing because it didn't have a name, it didn't have a lineage. And so I one of my friends who was a Nusui Reiki master and got the cosmic zap from her. No, I'm no offense to the Reiki spirits. I'm a big fan of the Reiki lineage because it's tailor made for this process, that it walks you step by step into a system. Even though it's not the one I learned myself, it doesn't work exactly the same way. It's similar enough that it opens up your human energy system and it kind of seals it open in a gentle kind of way. And because it's an initiatory tradition, what an initiation is, at least in my experience, and Chris, I know you have, we'll probably do a whole episode on initiations at some point in time. Initiation is like connecting you to a spiritual lineage. And by introducing you to that lineage, you become a part of the power and intention of that lineage. And that is exactly what happens when you are introduced to the Reiki practice. You are become a part of the lineage of everyone who is using Reiki, from the original creators in the early 1900s to now, and probably even before that, before they had a name for it, before it had a little trademark after its name. And those spirits are very, why do I keep thinking of kindergarten teachers? And very kind and very loving and very patient. They're very patient. And it has like 3 levels, so it's a very prescribed system. Becomes a way to introduce people, but also give them like a structure and open them up gently and slowly so that they can become used to the concept of what healing energy is. And if it's done by a good instructor, then I think it has a lot of potential. I've seen a lot of bad instructors, and I have horror stories about them too, but maybe that's another episode.
Yeah, that's in everything too. That's just the human condition.
Psychic horror stories.
Yeah, exactly. We could write that down.
And so when I've done trainings, when I can sit in front of someone and say, give me your hands, and walk them through a meditation of like, connect to the healing energy, imagine it flowing from the earth, through your body, into your heart, out your hands. No, don't push. No, you don't have to push. Let go. Like, there you go. There, you're getting it right. And they look at me like, oh my God, how did you know that? Because I've been doing this for a very long time. And I can feel the difference as if I just sort of switch the lenses to
very palpable,
feeling it a different way. And you can feel how the energy is flowing. And to me, it's like somewhere between air and water. There's a pressure behind it, and it's very real. And I would have thought it was nuts if I hadn't started meeting other people who do this all the time and at much greater levels of sophistication than I do.
Yeah, and that's a great description of it, because it is almost like this electromagnetic sort of goo in a way.
Yeah,
but
like
when you were talking about yeah, exactly, because it's very palpable and you can play with that and manipulate that. I'm not saying manipulate in a bad, I feel like that's a trigger word nowadays, but it's malleable and you're able to actually kind of work with it. And it's subtle, but the more you get used to it, you can find that kind of anywhere. It's pretty fascinating. But really quick, I have to dive in with your image of Reiki past teachers and this whole lineage of. Have you ever seen Avatar: The Last Airbender? But remember that scene when he's going back through all the statues and he's going back through all the last avatars, and then that's just the example.
Your past life as a Reiki avatar.
Yes.
It's something that everyone can learn. And it's something that some people seem to come in with, like the doors are already open and they have no support and they think they're nuts, or they don't have any understanding. They have no language. If they're lucky, they might have someone around them who can point them in the right direction. Or they have something happen to them, some healing crisis, and it sort of turns on and they get found by the appropriate shaman or healer. or they go on an adventure and they set a path to learn these things. It doesn't matter what way you come into
Right.
this. It's there for anyone who is willing to change their mindset,
Hmm.
that this healing potential is there. And I used to work for a hospital system, a really big hospital system here in Austin. I worked in the fundraising department. And it was such an interesting experience with all this healing practice that I was doing, because on the one hand, I would walk into one of the hospitals someday and I'd be like, I walk into a room and I go, oh my God, I don't ever want to be in here. Because if I get
Yeah.
sick, this is divorced from
Hmm.
everything I need to heal. Except in Children's Hospital, I'm like, if I get sick, just send me over there because they got toys and bright
Yeah.
colors, and I'm better off over there than I am over here.
Nutritious
There's
at
one
all.
little caveat. This is a Catholic hospital.
Mm.
And so they had their own interfaith spirituality center attached to the hospital system. And in the Interfaith Spirituality Center, they were teaching holistic touch, which is basically
Very cool.
the nurse's version of hands on healing light, that they're teaching in the Interfaith Spirituality Center as a continuing education credit for all the nurses in the hospital program. So
That's
any
fantastic.
nurse who was working in any facility in the network could go through that program, which made it feel like even though the whole mass of it is still not necessarily where I want to be, they did have like inroads
Yeah.
into thinking holistically that wasn't completely shut out of the equation because, from the Catholic tradition that we're coming from.
Yeah, no, no. I actually, ironically, some of the good hospitals around here, like some of the best and almost more progressive ones, have been the most Catholic run hospitals, which is kind of ironic in its own way. But I do see that kind of coming around as well. Like even one of my old anthropology teachers who actually I think taught a course on shamanism used to work in a hospital, and there was always stories of different shamanic practitioners being involved in the hospitals now going around, so it is becoming more mainstream, more welcomed. um there's a lot of reasons for that kind of bridging. I think the way materialism and, I guess we'll say, hardcore science has gone its journey, going into more of those quantum realms, learning about that opening and deepening of the mystery, how it the more we actually learned, the more we, like you said earlier, we realized we absolutely know nothing, which is really fantastic. And I think there's something like, we're just going to be a little tangent where we're bringing back to the beginning, but we know more about the solar system than our own oceans. It's a perfect example. Which actually is actually kind of a creepy example, because like if you want to take like the oceans as our unconscious, we know nothing about ourselves. So take that which way you want.
That is an excellent metaphor. That's an excellent metaphor for our human state of collective understanding.
Right?
But can you imagine a world where the majority of people could tune in to their own electric potential,
Yeah.
so to speak? Because I think with it comes the reality that we're all fields, we're all approximations of something, and we're all overlapping. And when you can recognize you're all overlapping with the other people,
Yeah.
the sense of separateness is not quite the same. You can have your own individual identity, but you also cannot ignore the collective or the community.
Right.
It can't be about just you and your own petty little concerns, because where is the end of you? And where's the
Exactly.
beginning of somewhere else? It's in this gray area in between. We would change the world.
Absolutely. And I think we're kind of, you mentioned us earlier, and I feel like it's a remembrance. It's not something kind of that we've forgotten, but it's more that we're kind of asleep to it and we're waking back up to it. It is that inherent birthright of just this divine potential, divine play that we're capable of. Because our intimacy with the universe, with each other, with the planet is more powerful or in depth than we realize, because we have been conditioned to not see it, to forget about it. We have this dominant perspective of reality that kind of, for whatever reason developed, for probably for our own sanity's sake at one point in time, as we had to move to another angle. But I really see it as, we're falling into these dark ages, the Kali Yuga cycle, and this natural ebb and flow where there's a pull, then there's a return. And I feel like we are into that return.
I hope
Yeah.
so, because it's the best antidote to the state of mind we find ourselves in. And I mean, I'll call a spade a spade. I think in the Western world, it's dominated by two things. One, a religion that wanted a monopoly, and two, a science that wanted a monopoly. And both of them, I was going to say burning the candle at both ends, but it's really extinguishing the candle at both ends. Let's be clear. It's putting out the lights. They both gave us a lot that we wouldn't have had otherwise, but we also lost a lot. And I left the formal Christian tradition a long time ago, because for me, it didn't make any sense. It made sense to think of us all. Everyone is divine. We are all containers of the spark of consciousness. Right. And when we respect that everyone is divine, then the concept of hell and damnation and chosen ones, it doesn't make any sense anymore, because we all have the potential to transcend. That's the definition of life. It comes from a science point of view. I also love science. I love math. I love all of the human creativity and the things that we come up with. It's amazing. But that amazement ends when we start reducing things to whatever you can touch and kick. Right. And that's all there is. And everything is dead. Ironically, I think you needed to have the oppression of religion to give birth to science. Because they wouldn't have dared to start recalling everything as dead had the religion not done the separation to begin with. Right. God's way out there, far away. You are terrible grubs down here.
Right, inherent sin, and yeah.
God got so far away from the equation, they'd be like, okay, well, if all there is dirt, we might as well just be dirt and be done with it. And so science was born. That has given us a lot. But as you say, we are to the point where science is proving its limits, which is the destruction of our natural environment, which I'm sure will give birth to something else if we can't live here anymore, because it always does. But I would prefer not to have to go through that, because it's a nice planet and we really don't need to do that. So let's choose something different.
Right. It would be leaving in the wrong. I actually think about this quite often. If we leave in that context of refugees, of destroying this planet and then seeking asylum elsewhere, we're not going to learn from our lessons. We're only going to repeat the same pattern over and over. And I don't care how big the solar system is, how big the galaxy is, how big the universe is, it'll never be enough. So it's a much nicer thought to think that, okay, we can reach a level of maturity, balance, and understanding that we are symbiotic, we're interconnected with our environment, and we need to have that kind of give and take and respect, and then carrying that ideology into the stars. That's what I want to see what happen.
Bring on the Federation.
Exactly. I don't want to be chasing shadows and dragons.
This gets us back to where science fiction and fantasy can give us hope, because if it can give us the worst case scenarios, it's also given us images of the best case scenarios.
Absolutely.
And so we can think about our options, even if it's just on the level of the collective unconscious. I really do believe our collective unconscious, even though it doesn't always have a single figurehead as a voice. It's constantly weighing the alternatives and doing
Yeah,
some kind of processing of considering what we might want to manifest in the future as a group. And
absolutely.
the miracle will be the day when it becomes more overt because we will have grown up into something different than we are right now. So we keep hoping. We keep hoping
Keep hoping.
that
I mean, we have 3 years till the Bell riots.
we were talking about Deep Space Nine just before this, and so I we have both revealed our deep level of geekdom at that comment. So if you have no idea what we're talking about, I will make sure there's a link in the show notes to some perky YouTube video that explains the reference.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But there is things to
I'll
hope
write
for.
that down on my show notes information page right now.
Yes. I mean, I don't know. I find it absolutely fascinating, but I'm also biased. I love to write fiction. I love to immerse myself into dream, into story, and it is always fascinating to kind of feel that pulse of what is possible, what is coming. Um, yeah, so I always lean to the side of hope, and because I feel like that there is a lot of hope, and there is a lot of light, and there is a lot of love, and that's the lifeblood of the universe right there. So a lot of times we get in our own way, and or we, you know, we're talking about long-term cycles, then that's a long destruction phase. That's a long turnaround, but that's on the scale of time itself. So like keeping that candle lit for your own health and sanity, and also like holding that place for joy. Like there's great moments of suffering happening in the world all the time, but if you are in that position to be joyful and happy while that is happening, then you're holding space for that light, for that joy, and respecting the suffering that is absolutely happening too, because it's not, whether it's not in vain or it's not completely meaningless, but those, we're always holding space for one another, and those situations change in our lives quite often, and it's kind of how we show up to them, how we sit with them, and just be present with it and not judgmental.
That was beautiful. And it sounds like such a lovely place to end this episode on a hopeful note. Now, I was telling Chris earlier that we always end these episodes with an experiment that people can do for themselves. How about we get Chris to give you an experiment for how you can tap into this potent healing energy field for yourself?
Yeah. So a fun little practice we can kind of do to ground. I mean, this is super simple, but it's actually just the visceral power of touch and our hands and kind of walking through the world. So I had it in mind because not everyone has forest access, and some people are living in the city, but there's kind of things that I kind of do a little bit everywhere. Is to, I'm walking by a brick wall and I kind of graze my hand over it. If I'm walking by a tree, I press my palm on it. Or if I'm walking, by a bush, I kind of rub my fingertips against the brush. And obviously, if I'm in the forest doing like earthing, which, having your bare feet on the ground, again, touching a tree, hugging a tree, is very powerful. And I feel like it opens up to that sense of where you start and end and another begins. And inanimate life forms there's a lot of energy going on there too. Like we're all made of the same stuff, and there's still atoms and molecules kind of spinning around, and there is a field there as well. The cities need a little bit of love there too, and the concrete jungle needs a little love and tenderness. And we don't really get to see it too much in our building ages and what have you, that residual kind of presence that gets built up in a city or in a building, but it's palpable and it's there, and it's very simple. Like even just like close your eyes while you're walking, if you could have music on and have your hands down at your side and kind of feel that energy pulsing through your fingertips, and you can increase that. Do we walk through crowds anymore? Who knows? But when we get to again, and you could just play with that field, it's very simple. Yeah, that's what came to mind.
It sounds like the topic of another episode, the interrelationship of mindfulness and being mindful in that moment of connection, of what can come from that.
I love that. Yeah.
All right.
That
You're going to have to
is-
stay tuned for that. Thank you, Chris, for that. I can't wait to start going around and touching things. Does that sound bad?
Within reason, you'll be fine.
In the meantime, if you want to talk more about experiments like this one, or dive deeper into the current cosmic weather forecast, or just find other ways to live a more magical life, my Magic and Mastery Coven is still going strong. You know, as I said before, we've got over 50 trainings, guided meditations, monthly magical challenges, and even an engaged and heart-centered community. Even better, there are no contracts to sign. You're not signing away your soul when you join the Coven. So if you want to find out more information, just go to www.magicandmastery.com/coven and you'll find out some more information. And of course, don't forget to check out the show notes at www.magicandmastery.com/podcast. As I promised, we've included timestamps and links to books and other things that we talk about during the episode, just to make it super easy to find what you're looking for. So, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Magic and Mastery with us, your hosts. I'm Donna Woodwell. This is Chris Kaplan. And of course, we love getting feedback. It helps us figure out what makes you jazzed, so we can provide you with more of the stuff that you love. So it would mean so much to us if you take a moment to rate and review the podcast. And if you like it, why don't you share it with a friend?